All right, so you send over a ton of articles about sustainable living. Looks like you're ready to really dive in.
Yeah, definitely a lot of great resources here.
And it seems like you want to go way beyond, just basic recycling.
Absolutely.
And I get it. It can be a little overwhelming, trying to figure out where to even start with all this stuff.
Totally. It can feel like a lot.
But what if I told you that making a difference doesn't have to be this big, overwhelming thing?
Right.
That even small changes can make a real impact, and those changes don't have to be boring or restrictive either.
Exactly. That's what we're going to uncover today.
I love that. So before we get into the nitty-gritty, let's start big picture. What exactly is sustainable living? And we hear that phrase all the time, but what does it actually mean?
You're right. It's one of those buzzwords that gets thrown around a lot.
Yeah.
But at its core, it's really about understanding how our choices impact the environment.
Okay, so our everyday choices.
Yeah. And then from there, finding ways to reduce that impact.
Yeah.
It's not about being perfect or, living off the grid or anything. It's more about just making conscious choices that help ensure a healthy planet for ourselves and, future generations.
Right, making sure there's something left for the kids and grandkids.
Exactly.
Okay, so it's about recognizing that our actions and the environment are, connected, but why should someone actually care about all of this? I mean, everyone's busy, right? What makes sustainable living worth adding to an already overflowing to-do list?
That's a great question. And it's something a lot of people struggle with.
For sure.
The truth is, though, unsustainable living has some pretty serious consequences. We're using up the Earth's resources way faster than they can replenish themselves.
Right. We can't just keep taking and taking.
Exactly. And on top of that, we're pumping all these greenhouse gases into the atmosphere, which is leading to, climate change. And then we're polluting our air and our water and our land, which harms wildlife and human health. All of these are direct results of unsustainable practices.
Okay, I see your point. These are big issues, but they can sometimes feel, distant, like they're happening out there, but not necessarily affecting our daily lives. How can we make it more personal? More relatable?
Well, think about it this way. Unsustainable practices often lead to things like social injustice and economic inequality.
Okay, so it's tied into bigger social problems too.
Right. It's the poorest and most vulnerable communities that are hit hardest by environmental problems. For example, people living in areas with higher pollution levels often have less access to health care.
Which just perpetuates the cycle.
Exactly. So sustainable living isn't just about saving the planet in some abstract sense. It's about creating a more just and equitable world for everyone.
That definitely makes it more personal.
It does, and it helps us see that we're all interconnected.
All right, so we've covered the what and the why, but now let's get to the how. What can people actually do to live more sustainably? Where do we even begin?
Well, that's where those resources you sent come in handy. They're packed with practical advice.
I was hoping you'd say that.
And the good news is you don't have to overhaul your whole life overnight. Start small, build those sustainable habits gradually, and find what works best for you. It's a journey, and every step makes a difference.
Okay, I'm feeling less overwhelmed already. So let's start at home. What are some simple things we can do to make our houses more eco-friendly? Where should we start?
Well, let's talk about energy first. Reducing energy consumption is huge. One of the easiest things you can do is swap out those old incandescent light bulbs for LEDs.
LEDs?
Yeah, they use up to 80% less energy than those old school bulbs.
Wow, that's a big difference.
And they last much longer, too. In fact, just one LED bulb can save enough energy to power your TV for a whole month.
Okay, I'm sold. What else can we do to save energy at home?
How about tackling that phantom power drain?
Phantom power, what is that?
So it's the energy that electronics use even when they're turned off but still plugged in.
Oh, right.
Like phone chargers, laptops, even your coffee maker.
Oh, I never think about that.
Yeah, they can be silently sucking energy and running up your electricity bill.
So just unplugging things when you're not using them can make a difference.
Exactly. Small change, big impact. You could even use a power strip and just switch it off completely when you're done.
Smart. I'm definitely guilty of leaving things plugged in all the time. So energy-saving light bulbs, unplugging stuff. What else?
Let's move over to the laundry room. Most of the energy used to wash clothes goes towards heating the water.
Makes sense.
So switching to cold water washes saves a ton of energy. Plus, it's actually gentler on your clothes, so they'll last longer.
Oh, that's a good point. I've also been trying to air dry my clothes more often. It saves energy, and I love the smell of laundry dried by the sun.
Right. It's like a little reward.
Yeah.
And if you really want to take your energy savings to the next level, investing in renewable energy sources like solar panels can make a big difference.
Solar panels seem like a big commitment, though.
They can be, but they're becoming more and more affordable. And depending on where you live, there might be government incentives to help with the cost.
Worth looking into. Okay, so we've covered energy. What about water conservation? With droughts becoming more frequent, it seems like we need to be more mindful about our water use.
Absolutely. And just like with energy, small changes can make a big impact. Start with something as simple as taking shorter showers. Did you know a 5-minute shower uses way less water than a bath?
Okay, see, I always thought baths were more efficient.
Nope, showers win.
Uh-huh.
And speaking of water, make sure to fix any leaky faucets. Even a tiny drip can waste gallons of water a day.
Ugh, I know I always mean to fix them and then I forget. Okay, no more leaky faucets.
Good. Now, for those who really want to commit to water conservation, there's also collecting and reusing water. Like you mentioned earlier, using that pasta water for your plants is a great start.
Yeah, and I've heard of those fancy gray water systems, but they seem pretty complicated.
They can be, but they're getting more user-friendly. They collect water from your showers, sinks, laundry, and then they filter it so you can use it to water your garden or flush your toilets.
Wow, so you're basically creating your own little water recycling system.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've covered energy and water. Now let's talk waste. It feels like everyone knows the basics of recycling. But what else can we do to reduce our overall waste? You're right, recycling is just the tip of the iceberg. These resources you shared lay it out really well. They break waste reduction down into the 3 R's.
Reduce, reuse, recycle.
That's classic.
It's a classic for a reason. So reduce comes first. What are some practical ways to reduce the amount of stuff we bring into our lives?
Yeah, I'm all ears because it feels like we're constantly bombarded with messages to buy, buy, buy.
I know, it's tough. But it starts with being more mindful about your consumption. Before you buy something, ask yourself, do I really need this or do I just want it? Can I borrow it from someone? Can I buy it secondhand?
It's about being intentional with our purchases.
Exactly. Shifting from a mindset of, I need this new thing, to, can I make do with what I already have? And buying in bulk whenever possible can also cut down on packaging waste.
Oh, that's a good point. I always forget about buying in bulk.
Okay.
So we're reducing what we bring in. What
Yeah.
about reuse? That's where you can get creative. Give items a second life. Glass jars can become storage containers. Old T-shirts can be cleaning rags. Let your imagination run wild.
I love it, turning trash into treasure. And of course, we can't forget about those reusable bags, cups, and containers to avoid single-use plastics.
Yes. Billions of disposable cups end up in landfills every year. Just think of the impact we can have by bringing our own reusable stuff.
Wow, that's mind-blowing. Okay, and finally, recycle. It seems pretty straightforward, but are there any nuances we should be aware of?
Definitely. While recycling is great, it's important to do it right. Following your local guidelines is key because what's recyclable can vary from place to place.
So, like, some plastics might be okay in one city, but not in another.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And don't forget to clean your containers before tossing them in the bin. Nobody wants a stinky recycling bin.
Yeah, I've learned that the hard way. And what about those trickier items to recycle, like batteries or electronics?
Good question. For those, check with your local government or look into services like TerraCycle. They specialize in recycling those hard-to-recycle materials.
Cool, I'll have to check that out. Okay, we've tackled the 3 R's, but what about food? How do our food choices connect to all of this?
That's a big one, and it's something these resources really dive into. The environmental impact of meat production, especially beef, is huge.
I've heard that, but can you break it down for us?
So raising livestock requires a ton of land, water, and feed. And the process of raising and processing meat releases a lot of greenhouse gases into the atmosphere.
So cutting back on meat, especially red meat, would make a big difference.
It really would. And the good news is there are so many delicious plant-based options available these days.
Right. It's not about deprivation, it's about finding tasty alternatives. And while we're on the topic of food, we can't forget about minimizing food waste. It's crazy how much food ends up in landfills.
That's a huge problem. Composting is a great solution. It keeps those food scraps out of landfills, reduces methane emissions, and creates this nutrient-rich soil you can use for your garden.
I love composting. It feels good to turn those scraps into something useful. Okay, we've covered a lot of ground here, from energy and water conservation to waste reduction and sustainable food choices. It's amazing how much we can do right at home. But I have a feeling sustainable living goes way beyond our homes, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, I'm ready to dive in.
Let's do it. Well, let's start with transportation. It's such a big part of modern life, right? But it's also a major contributor to our environmental footprint.
Yeah, I mean, we've got to get around somehow.
Exactly. But there are ways to lessen the impact. It starts with realizing that we don't always have to hop in the car. Walking, biking, taking public transportation whenever possible can make a big difference.
Okay, but what about those people who live in areas without good public transportation or those who have super long commutes?
I hear you. Those are real challenges.
Yeah.
But even in those situations, there are things you can do, like carpooling or ride sharing.
Right, sharing the ride so there are fewer cars on the road.
Exactly. And if you have the option working from home, even a couple of days a week, can really cut down on those commute-related emissions.
Yeah, I've noticed when more people work from home, the air quality in my city is noticeably better.
That's a great point. And of course, if you're in the market for a new car, considering fuel-efficient or electric models is a big one.
Right, electric cars are becoming more and more mainstream.
They are, and they can really reduce your transportation emissions.
Okay, so we've got walking, biking, carpooling, working from home, and electric vehicles. What about consumption in general? It feels like we're constantly being told to buy more stuff. How can we be more mindful about what we're buying?
Yes, the age-old problem of consumerism. But the good news is we have more power than we think. It's all about becoming more conscious consumers.
What does that mean, exactly?
Well, it's about being aware of the impact our purchases have, not just on the environment, but also on the people who make those products and the communities where they're produced.
So it's like thinking about the whole life cycle of a product, from where it came from to how it ended up in our hands.
You got it. The more we understand about that journey, the better choices we can make.
Okay, I'm ready to become a conscious consumer. Where do I start?
Well, one of the biggest things is reducing our consumption overall. Before you buy anything, ask yourself, do I really need this? Or can I borrow it? Can I buy it secondhand? It's about shifting our mindset from, I need the newest thing, to, can I make do with what I already have?
It's funny because sometimes the simplest solutions are the most sustainable.
Absolutely. And when you do need to buy something, try to prioritize quality over quantity. Investing in well-made durable items means you won't have to replace them as often.
Right, it's about buying less but buying better.
Exactly. And let's not forget about the joy of secondhand shopping.
Oh, I love a good thrift store find.
Me too. You can find some amazing treasures, and you're giving those items a second life. Plus, it's usually much more affordable.
Definitely a win-win for your wallet and the planet. So we're thinking about reducing our consumption and buying secondhand. What else should we be considering when we're shopping?
Materials are a big one. These resources you sent are full of information about eco-friendly materials.
Like what? Give us some examples.
Well, bamboo is a fantastic sustainable material. It grows super fast, it requires minimal pesticides, and it's incredibly versatile.
I knew bamboo was sustainable, but I had no idea it was that versatile.
It's pretty amazing. You can find bamboo clothing, bamboo kitchenware, even bamboo flooring and furniture.
Wow, I'm gonna have to check that out. What other cool materials are out there?
Cork is another great option. It's harvested from the bark of cork oak trees. And the cool thing is those trees regenerate their bark, so it's a renewable resource.
So no trees are harmed in the making of cork products.
Exactly. And cork is naturally antimicrobial, hypoallergenic, and really durable. You can find it in things like flooring, yoga mats, wallets, handbags, even shoes.
I'm picturing a really chic pair of cork sandals.
I love it. Sustainable and stylish.
Okay, so we're checking out the materials. What about certifications? Are there any labels we should look for to know that a product was made sustainably?
Definitely. The Forest Stewardship Council, or FSC certification, is a big one. It ensures that wood and paper products come from responsibly managed forests.
So if you see that little FSC logo, you know it's a good sign.
Exactly. And for textiles, look for the Global Organic Textile Standard, or GOTS certification. It guarantees that the textiles are made from organic fibers and produced under fair labor conditions.
Right, because fair labor practices are a huge part of sustainability, too.
Absolutely. It's about making sure the people who make the things we buy are treated ethically and paid fairly.
Okay, so we're checking labels, looking for certifications. But what about the companies themselves? How can we know if a company is genuinely committed to sustainability or if they're just greenwashing?
That's a great question, and unfortunately, greenwashing is a real problem. So you have to do a little detective work. Don't be afraid to dig deeper. Check out the company's website. Do they have a clear sustainability policy? Are they transparent about their supply chain and environmental impact?
So it's about looking beyond the marketing and really scrutinizing their practices.
Exactly. And remember, we have power as consumers. If you're not happy with a company's sustainability practices, let them know. Send an email post on social media. Consider taking your business elsewhere.
It's about voting with our dollars.
It is. Our choices have power. You know, something else has been on my mind throughout this conversation. The idea of simplicity. How does that fit into sustainable living?
Oh, simplicity. That's a good one.
It's about decluttering our lives, both physically and mentally. Focusing on what truly matters, letting go of that need to constantly acquire more stuff, and finding joy in experiences, relationships, personal growth.
I love that. It's about shifting our values from material possessions to experiences and connections.
Exactly. And when we simplify our lives, we naturally consume less. We're less focused on keeping up with the Joneses and more focused on living a life that aligns with our values.
So it's a win-win for our well-being and the health of the planet.
Absolutely. You know, earlier you mentioned those sustainable innovations. What are some other examples of people coming up with cool solutions to make everyday products more eco-friendly?
Yeah, I'm always fascinated by those. I'm ready for more.
Well, have you heard of a company called Eco Egg? They make a laundry egg. It's this reusable egg sheet container that you fill with mineral pellets, and those pellets clean your clothes. So you don't need laundry detergent.
Wait, you're telling me I can wash my clothes without detergent?
You can. And the pellets are free of harsh chemicals, and they last for hundreds of washes. So you're reducing waste, and you can ditch those big plastic detergent jugs.
That's so cool. I've never heard of that before. What other innovations are out there?
Well, there's Pinatex. It's a leather alternative made from pineapple leaf fibers.
Pineapple leather. That's amazing.
It is. It's a sustainable and cruelty-free option for people who want to avoid animal products.
It's crazy how innovative people are coming up with all these alternatives. It gives me hope that we can find sustainable solutions for pretty much anything.
Me too. It's really inspiring. But I also want to acknowledge that sustainable living isn't always easy. There are challenges, right?
Oh, for sure. It's not always a walk in the park.
Hmm.
What are some of the obstacles that people might face?
Well, cost is a big one. Sustainable options are often more expensive. Organic food, eco-friendly clothing, renewable energy systems. Those things can come with a higher price tag, which can be tough for a lot of people.
Yeah, especially for those who are already struggling to make ends meet. It can feel like sustainable living is a privilege that's not accessible to everyone.
That's a valid point, and it's something we need to address as a society. Sustainable options should be affordable and accessible to everyone, not just the wealthy.
I agree. What other challenges are there?
Well, greenwashing is another big one. Companies making misleading claims about their environmental practices just to appeal to consumers. It can be hard to know what's genuinely sustainable and what's just clever marketing.
Right. It's all about being a savvy consumer and doing your research.
Exactly. And then there's the feeling that our individual actions don't really matter in the grand scheme of things. Like, does it really make a difference if I choose to bike to work instead of drive, or if I switch to a reusable water bottle?
Oh, I've definitely felt that way before. Like my little efforts are just a drop in the ocean.
I get it. But it's so important to remember that individual actions do matter.
But what about that argument that it's really up to the corporations and governments to make the big changes?
They absolutely need to step up. But our individual choices can create a ripple effect. When we make sustainable choices, we're sending a message to those businesses and policymakers that sustainability matters. We're creating demand for eco-friendly products and services, and we're inspiring others to do the same.
So it's a combination of individual action and systemic change.
Exactly. And never underestimate the power of your voice and your vote. Advocate for policies that support sustainability, support organizations working on environmental issues, let your elected officials know that you care.
Right. We can all be part of creating a world where sustainable living is the norm, not the exception. So even though there are challenges, it's important to stay hopeful and focus on the positive impact we can have.
I completely agree. It's easy to get caught up in the doom and gloom, but there's so many amazing stories of people making a difference all over the world.
Can you share an example? I'm always inspired by those real-world success stories.
Sure. There's this community in Trondheim, Norway that built a building called the Powerhouse Bredekaya. It's designed to create more energy than it uses.
Wait, a building that generates its own energy?
Yep. And it even shares its excess energy with nearby buildings and the electric transit system. It's a fantastic example of sustainable architecture.
That's amazing. It shows that we can create buildings that are part of the solution, not part of the problem. What other examples are there?
Oh, there's so many. Urban farms, community gardens, bike sharing programs, renewable energy cooperatives. People all over the world are coming up with creative solutions, and it's really exciting to see.
It is. It feels like a movement that's gaining momentum.
Yeah.
So where do we go from here? What's next on our deep dive journey?
Well, in part 3, we're going to get personal and explore the concept of the ecological footprint.
The ecological footprint. I like it.
We'll learn how to calculate our own impact on the planet and find ways to shrink our footprint.
Okay, I'm ready to measure my impact and see how I can lighten my footprint on the planet.
Me too. It's going to be an eye-opening exploration.
All right, welcome back to our deep dive into sustainable living. It's been quite a journey so far.
It has. We've covered a lot of ground.
We've talked about all sorts of actions we can take and innovations that are happening, and it's been super inspiring.
Definitely.
But now I want to get personal. I want to understand my own impact on the planet.
I like that. Getting down to the nitty-gritty.
Right. So is there a way to actually measure that impact? Like, is there some kind of tool or metric we can use?
There is. It's called the ecological footprint.
The ecological footprint. Okay, I've heard of that, but I'm not really sure what it means.
So basically, it calculates how much land and water area is required to support your lifestyle.
So like all the resources I use and the waste I generate?
Exactly. It takes everything into account. The food you eat, the energy you use, the stuff you buy, even your transportation habits.
Wow. So it's like a personal scorecard for your impact on the planet.
You got it. It's a way to see how your choices add up.
That's really cool. But it also sounds kind of complicated. How do they even calculate something like that?
It can be a pretty complex calculation, but thankfully there are online calculators that make it super easy.
Oh, so you just plug in some information about your lifestyle.
Exactly. And the calculator does all the work for you.
That's awesome. It's like those online quizzes that tell you what kind of bread you are.
Haha, I love that analogy.
But for your environmental impact.
Exactly. And just like those quizzes, the results can be surprising. You might discover that your footprint is bigger or smaller than you thought.
Okay, so let's say someone calculates their ecological footprint and they realize it's pretty big. What can they do to actually shrink it?
That's where all those practical tips we talked about in the previous episodes come in. Remember the 3 R's. Reduce, reuse, recycle.
Reduce, reuse, recycle, of course.
Those are key strategies for minimizing your waste and your overall consumption.
Right, and we talk about all those simple things we can do around the house, like switching to LED light bulbs, unplugging electronics, washing clothes in cold water, taking shorter showers.
Exactly. All of those things add up.
And then there's transportation. Choosing to walk, bike, or take public transportation instead of driving can make a big difference too.
It really can. And if you have to drive, carpooling or ride-sharing can help reduce the impact.
And let's not forget about food choices. Eating less meat, opting for more plant-based meals. Those are big ones too.
Huge. And composting is an easy way to reduce food waste and turn those scraps into something useful.
Okay, so we've got all those individual actions we can take. But what about those bigger systemic changes we talked about? Do those play a role in shrinking our footprints?
They absolutely do. Our individual choices are important, but they need to be coupled with larger scale changes in policy and infrastructure.
Right, because our individual choices can only go so far if the systems around us aren't set up for sustainability.
Exactly. Like if our cities are designed for cars, it's going to be much harder to reduce our transportation footprints no matter how much we try.
So what can we do to advocate for those systemic changes that can help everyone shrink their footprints?
Well, we can support organizations that are working on environmental issues. We can contact our elected officials. We could vote for policies that promote things like renewable energy, sustainable transportation, and responsible consumption.
It's about using our voices and our votes to push for a more sustainable future. We can all be part of creating a world where living sustainably is the norm, not the exception.
I love that. And, there's this concept I want to introduce that builds on the idea of sustainability. It's called regenerative living.
Regenerative living. Okay, I'm intrigued. What's that all about?
So it takes sustainable living a step further. Instead of just doing less harm, regenerative living focuses on actively restoring and regenerating the ecosystems we rely on. It's about finding ways to give back more than we take.
So it's like going from playing defense to playing offense, from minimizing our impact to actually healing the planet.
Exactly. A great example is regenerative agriculture. It's a holistic approach to farming that focuses on building healthy soil, increasing biodiversity, and sequestering carbon from the atmosphere.
So it's like farming that actually makes the land healthier.
Exactly. Instead of depleting the soil, it's actually building it up.
Wow, that's incredible. It's like this whole other level of sustainability. It gives me hope that we can move beyond just minimizing our impact and actually start to reverse some of the damage that's been done.
It's a powerful vision, and it's gaining momentum. There are regenerative practices emerging in all sorts of areas: forestry, urban planning, even business models. It's all about designing systems that regenerate rather than degrade.
That's so inspiring. It's like we can actually create a future where human activities are a force for good for the planet.
I agree. And that brings us to the end of our deep dive into sustainable living. What a journey it's been.
It really has. We've explored so much. Practical tips, inspiring innovations, challenges, and even a glimpse into a regenerative future. What's the key takeaway you hope our listener is walking away with?
I think the most important thing to remember is that sustainable living is not about perfection. It's about progress. It's about making conscious choices one step at a time and being kind to yourself along the way.
I love that. It's a journey, not a destination. And every step we take, no matter how small, makes a difference. So let's keep learning, keep exploring, and keep making those choices that create a more beautiful and sustainable world.
Absolutely. And remember, it's contagious. Every sustainable choice we make inspires others to do the same.
That's a great point. So thank you for joining us on this deep dive into sustainable living. We hope you feel inspired and empowered to make a difference.
It's been a pleasure diving deep with you.
And until next time, keep those sustainable choices coming.